Okay. Welcome everybody. Sorry, I just started talking. You got us. My fault. Welcome everybody to this first joint place and honors event. This is the kickoff to the place lunch and learn. Is that right? Lunch and learn?
Food for thought.
Food for thought. Dang it. I knew it was one of the two and I got it wrong. We're now 50-50. Food for Thought series. I'm very happy to be kicking it off. I'm also happy to have the second honors colloquium. We had an honors colloquium here yesterday. I see many of the same people, and I see some new ones as well. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Craig Nakashian. I'm the dean of the Honors College, also a professor of history. And so I was very excited when Dr. Minton suggested that I lead off the Food for Thought series because the place theme this year, the Program for Learning and Community Engagement, is science and technology. And so I didn't miss anything there, right?
No, science, technology, and society.
That was very kind of you to say no, even though I did. Science, technology, and society. And so I said, well, I used to teach a class on futurism that this is the first semester in the last few years that I haven't taught it. So I was very disappointed that I didn't get a chance to talk about this kind of newfound interest in futurism. And I can repurpose it to talk, as you can see, about how science and technology and imagination sort of created a future that never happened, or in some cases did. So I'm going to give you a very short version of what my students in this class got to engage with over 15 weeks. Any students here who actually took that futurism class? Hey, and you're still at the university and hale and hearty, so there you go. I don't want to go so far as to say it's the best class ever, but I wouldn't say it's not. It did quickly become one of my favorite classes to teach. And so yeah, let's get into this. A couple of quick provisos, and then we're going to burn through this really, really fast, because I do want to have time for conversation. I don't want this just to be me talking at you, though I'm happy with that too, because I love talking. That's fine. The first question you may be asking yourself, especially for my background is as a medieval historian. My research is in the England of like the 1200s, the 1100s. Why am I now talking to you about the future? Right? Why is a historian talking about the future? So, hey, let's do this like class. Why should I give you the answer? That seems easy. Oh, there we go. Got it. Why would I do it? Oh, I love it. Yes. If you don't study history, you are, as multiple apocryphal people said, you're doomed to repeat it. Sure, that's a good reason to study the past. Although, as you'll learn, we don't really learn from it. Doesn't matter. But why would a historian want to talk about the future specifically? Because here's the thing, future ain't happened yet. I don't think. I'm not a physicist. I'm pretty sure it hasn't. Any ideas? Yeah.
Because we can still affect the future.
We can still affect the future, so it's useful for us to think about. Any other? Yeah.
The more we know of the future. What was the question again?
No, it's fair, right? That's a tough one. The more we know of the future, but here's the problem, it hasn't happened. So the reason why we as historians maybe want to study the future is because here's the thing my students learn. It's not about the future, guys, right? As you point out, the future ain't happened yet. So what's this class actually about?
People's perception of the future.
What people think the future is going to be and what that tells us about them, right? That's the whole point. The class is about why did people in the 1860s or the 1940s or the 20-teens think about the future the way they did? And are there some commonalities? Are there some things that can tell us about that society? So that's what I loved about this class, because I tricked them into thinking we were going to talk about the future, which sounds fun, but instead we talked about the past, which is boring. And so as historians, we know this implicitly, and we trick each of you who come to our classes into thinking the past is fun. And that's for you, Perry, as a fellow history professor. But no, we all know that the past is fantastic. All right, so that's why we're doing it. That's the idea. So some of the basic themes of futurism that we run through in the class, and then we'll look at some examples, and then we'll talk about them. One, we start the class with the end of the world, right? My students may recall, one of the first things we talk about is Armageddon, the Book of Revelation, because we're looking at it primarily in kind of a European American context. We talk about the end of the world a lot. When you look at futurism, guess what? A lot of it's about the end of the world. So there are a huge number of apocalyptic scenarios that we like to imagine when we think about the future. Okay, so that's one that we think about. Another would be something like, I don't know, has anyone ever heard of AI? Is that a thing? Don't raise your hands, that was a joke. Obviously, you've heard of AI. Why have you heard of AI? Yeah, because we use it, it's everywhere, it's replacing every job you're ever going to have, apparently. I don't know, whatever, good luck for us. How long have we been talking about AI as a people?
For years now.
A few years, yeah, a few centuries, strictly speaking. You can go all the way back to, Golem, I suppose, and other kind of stories. In our class, you could go all the way back to Frankenstein's monster if you wanted to. I don't, because I'm a pedant and it's not about the future, so I don't use it. But a lot of futurism is around the idea of artificial life. Things like robots, right? Frankenstein, or when we would watch bits from Metropolis or Terminator, or anything like that. Like, we're fascinated by this idea of creating life. Why? I don't know. Biologically, we seem to do it fairly easily, but we're really fascinated by this idea of creating life. The other part of it, though, would be like AI as we think of it in today's world, which is like computery type stuff, right? It's all software and electronics, and we think about that too. Obviously, things like the Matrix, virtual life, all that kind of fun stuff. So AI, artificial life. What else do we talk about in this class? We talk about dehumanization, right? What's dehumanization, do you think? Oh, Skylar.
It's kind of like degrading, making someone feel less human.
Yeah, making people feel less human. Great. So you should have taken the class. You would have been great. Amen. But where do we see that? What's that? I know it's not your fault. You weren't in the phone. If I teach it again, maybe you can take it. But dehumanization, you see this a lot, especially in the 19th century and into the 20th century, that the future is going to be a period where people are less valued as people. And I won't go through all the examples of that, but trust me, a crap ton of them, right? We were very worried about that in various contexts. People like Jules Verne, who we'll look at in a few minutes, he was worried that our fascination with practicality was going to make us less human. When you get into like socialism and so forth, there were these concerns as well. All right, we'll talk about that in a bit. Socialism and centralization, that was another huge idea of the future. As yes, I was nodding. Yes, I remember that well. When socialism kind of became a thing in the 19th century, people projected it into the future. What is this going to look like? Corporatism, nuclear war. Anyway, you get the idea. All happiness and light. So that's my introduction. Welcome to the future, right? On the one hand, oh, that failed miserably. Yeah, let's do that. On the one hand, sometimes we think the future is going to be great, right? If you do see some of these examples, these are mostly from the late 19th century France. This is a depiction of a H.G. Wells story. This, of course, is the Jetsons. People of my age remember this on TV. Star Trek, same sort of thing. Anyone? Back to the Future. Part 2. Thank you very much. Good. Fallout 4. Well done. All right, excellent. So sometimes we imagine the future is going to be great, but guess what? Not a lot, right? This is the minority. As my students will happily tell you on the board, probably the two most common words I would write were utopia and dystopia. And guess what? Which one did we talk a lot more about? Dystopia, yeah, because when we think about the future, it's usually pretty bleak. And there's a couple reasons for that. Why do you not want to? There we go. Yeah, this is much more common aspect of the future for us. Those of you might recognize some of this. Yet again, Fallout 4, because we finished the class looking at the Fallout series of video games, and now hit television show on Amazon Prime. Exciting, yeah, and it's really good, actually. This one's Fallout 3. You got Brave New World by Huxley. You get, Big Brother's watching you, right? We would never sign up for that. What's that from? Yeah, 1984. You get some more just obliteration. And my favorite thing to use, Walter Miller. You don't know who the hell Walter Miller is, and you shouldn't, because frankly, he wrote Canticle for Leibowitz, kind of about it. But why do I use Canticle for Leibowitz, anyone? Harlan?
It includes Texarkana.
It includes Texarkana. Yeah, he wrote this series of short stories that became a book in the late 50s, early 60s. And it's about, shockingly enough, the end of the world, the cyclical nature of history. Anyway, it's interesting. But the capital of the new American empire was Texarkana, Texas. Huzzah to us. And in part 3, it gets nuked into oblivion. Sorry, yeah. Spoiler alert if you've not read the book, but I get to use it and it's really fun and I enjoy it. Okay, so why do we have this image of the future in the modern world in the West, right? In the United States primarily, and a little bit in Western Europe, kind of where does this come from? So we get Revelation. There we go, skip over here. My argument in this class is that a lot of this is driven by industrialism, right? Where do you, some of those themes that I just talked about, where would you see that reflected in 19th century industrial revolution? Where would this have led to it? I.e., what's the connection? Based on what you know of industrialism. Some of the themes we talked about, like the future is going to be technologically focused, right? What are you making in these early factories? Stuff. Yeah, you're making stuff, right? You're not just growing food, you're building things, you're building widgets and widget-related activities. So the future is going to be driven by technology, it's going to be driven by manufacturing, it's going to be driven by productivity. And in fact, I argue that that's quite accurate. If you think about the past, what do you tend to gauge it by? How do you differentiate where we are now versus where we were in the past? What do you first think about? Okay. Amen. That's a probably better thing to think about as where we used to be and where we are now. But okay, yeah, not what I was thinking, but sure, fine. Okay.
Quality of life.
Quality of life. Well, that connects to it, yeah, obviously. But quality of life, as I was thinking, was more like technologically focused. You know, there was a time. Oh, yeah, Austin. Sorry.
Safety.
Like in life.
Yeah. We
Okay.
Children that work there is nothing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Kids used to work in the mines, like productive member of society. Yeah, where'd that go? Minton. Great invention.
But usually we think of eras as like, eras of innovation, technological advances and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, no, that's not wrong. Scott.
Greta Decker says stages in history, eras.
Okay, but what typifies them, right? What do we? You're right, Brenda. Thank you for chiming in. By the way, amen. A lot of the times, what we think about, and I'll just shoehorn you into my thinking because we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, is we do think about technological development. We think about maybe it's innovations in workplace safety or not putting kids in mines, although I see we have a couple of late 19th century capitalists here with us complaining bitterly, OSHA, bunch of socialist nonsense. What are we doing? Get rid of that, right? We think about it in terms of technological innovation and things are better now. I used to use this example. My poor son has joined us. I don't know that I should use it because it's from him. But when I used to explain that we didn't have things like Wi-Fi when I was a kid, or the internet even, and his very apt insight when he was about 7, sounds like the past sucked. You're not wrong, kid. It was a different time. Yeah, we didn't know what we didn't know. And futurism is sort of based on trying to imagine what we could know. So anyway, that's one thing. What other themes did I already mention that you could see maybe here? I don't know. How about like dehumanization? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Dehumanization. When people, and one of my favorite examples of this would be if you ever watched the film Metropolis, which I'm sure you haven't, but you could, I suppose, right? Classic 1920s German film, or the American film that parodies some of it, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times from the 1930s, where the workers in the factories are depicted as automatons. Right? They are depicted as dehumanized characters, that they do not have any agency, they do not have any individuality. And this comes both out of industrialism and it comes out of the concerns of that time. And then the last one that I would think about would be things like the apocalypse. How do we get to the apocalypse from industrialism? And this is one is a little bit tougher. It's a little more oblique. Right. Eventually, you're going to get nuclear apocalypse. You start seeing it more in the late 19th century and especially World War I. Right. One of the things I used in class is a scene from the remake of All Quiet on the Western Front. Anyone seen All Quiet on the Western Front? The new one? Yeah, it's brilliant. Utterly brilliant. The original is brilliant too, from 1930. But the remake, the scene that I use is when these German soldiers are fighting some French tanks. And this is a horrifying experience for them because war has become industrialized, right? There's this possibly apocryphal quotation attributed to the inventor of the modern machine gun, Hiram Maxim, who believed that by inventing the machine gun, he had eliminated war. Why had he eliminated war?
It would be too unreasonable, there would be too much death.
It would be insane to go to war when you can shoot bullets this quickly. Amen. So once you get past that, you start seeing this like, crap, we really are going to kill ourselves as a species. And then in the 40s, we developed nuclear bombs and we're like, oh, crap, we really are going to kill ourselves as a species. But hey, the Cold War is over and we won it. So everything's good now. Oh, wait, yeah. Going the other way. All right, cheerful. Let's move on. Yep, not everyone's happy. We get past all this stuff. We don't have time. All right, Jules Verne. So we're going to look at two figures for the most part who I argue are kind of most responsible or good touch points for us to consider the science of the future and how it shapes our vision of it even today, early 21st century. Oh, God. As we're rapidly approaching the middle part of the 21st century. The first is Jules Verne. How many folks here have heard of Jules Verne before? All right, just for funsies, how many folks here have never heard of Jules Verne before? Yeah, okay. Painful, but for American audiences of the mid to late 20th century, most of us knew Jules Verne because of Disney film adaptations of his work, right? If you watched like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, especially as a kid, I'm old enough to do that, I did. That like that's how you got your Jules Verne. But he was an incredibly prolific French author of the mid to late 19th century. I believe he is still the second most translated author in history after the Bible. I think that's still true. I don't know, but he's up there. Yeah, anyway. And when I initially started thinking of these topics years ago, I thought, oh, hey, I'll use Jules Verne because Verne loved technology, right? If you've ever read any of Jules Verne's stories or seen his films, a lot of it is about like, hey, well, look at all this cool new technology we've got in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, and imagine what it's going to mean for the world. So if you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he's talking about a submarine that can basically go all over the planet, and you can walk around on the bottom of the ocean, because they did actually have extraordinarily early versions of some of this technology. He had films about going to the moon, which he thought you would get to by just building a really, really big cannon and sitting in the shell as it shot you to the moon. He wasn't a physicist, guys. He was an adventure author. He had Journey to the Center of the Earth, right? Hey, we can build tunneling machines and get down into this lost world. So that was what I thought. And then I actually read Jules Verne, which is stupid. I did what a historian does. I did research, and that complicated my very easy narrative, which is one of the great advantages and annoying things about history. It makes things a lot more complicated, because I realized that Verne had a very, very complicated relationship with technology and the future. He was actually deeply concerned about what technology could mean for the future of humanity. So on the one hand, he does have what I call scientific triumphalism. He thinks this stuff is really cool, right? Some of these things, again, they look a little, dated by our, I hope they look dated to you. I don't know. But like, anyone know what the Ruhmkorff lamp was and what this is for?
Mining?
What? Did you?
I assumed mining.
Oh, okay. You could use it for mining. You could also use it in like aquatic areas. Like the idea was that you could like shine a light under the water with one of these lamps. That was really, really cool, right? Then you've got your rebreather apparatus to allow people to go underwater in those old, the old diving suits and everything. And so for somebody like Verne, he's sort of taking this technology and he's like, hey, imagine what the world is going to be like when you've got this stuff everywhere, right? It's opening up new vistas and new opportunities. One of my favorites comes from his Paris in the 20th century, where he envisions that Paris by 1960 is going to be consumed with horseless carriages that are operated by individuals and powered by internal combustion engines. He writes this in 1863. right? He says, in fact, of the countless carriages which clogged the boulevards, a great majority were horseless. They were invisibly powered by a motor which operated by gas combustion. This was the Lenoir machine applied to locomotion. Now, before we get too excited about Verne did not invent the idea of internal combustion engines. What he did is he looked at this invention from a few years earlier, 1859, I think it was patented by Lenoir, and he basically said, hey, imagine if this were put into a device with wheels, right? So that's what Verne was able to do. He was able to take technology and kind of push it further than it already had been. I shudder to ask. Oh, there it is, the time. Crap. Okay. Yep. Oh, have fun. Enjoy. They have to go to class. All right. So Verne is taking technology and he's pushing it forward. But as any of my students can tell you, this book is not positive. This book is not a comedy. This is the first book that Verne wrote. And this is the thing that complicated my narrative when I designed this talk, which then became a class. Because I thought Verne loved technology. I thought Verne was all about putting people in, submarines and sending them around the world. And then I read this stupid book that we didn't know existed until like 1990, because it had never been published until like his great-grandson found it in a trunk in the attic. And this is the first thing he tried to publish. He brought it to his publisher, and his publisher was like, Jules, Bobby, this is terrible. Nobody's going to read this. This is depressing as crap. Get out of here. Nobody wants this. Zeitgeist, man. Start publishing some stuff about how great technology is going to make the world. And Verne, capitalist at the end, was like, okay, yeah, sure, fine. There you go. And so we lost this. And then it was published. And the very short version of it is he imagines a world of the future that has been stripped of its humanity because of technology and because of practicality. I won't get you to all of it, but as a history professor, a lot of it hit very close to home, I'm not going to lie, because he imagined a world that had become industrialized to the point where nothing other than industry was valued. The arts were not valued, humanities were not valued, literature was not valued, painting was not valued. There's no point to it. That's what he was worried about, right? That dehumanization, that our fascination with technology and productivity and industrialism was going to make us not care about these other things. It's a bit like the meme on any of the social medias about how, I imagined that AI would basically find a way to do the dishes for me so that I can be freed up to make art. But in fact, it makes art for me so I can go do the dishes. And it's like, that's what he told you was going to happen, right? Verne was a futurist in the sense that he envisioned, yeah, we may end up doing this, right? One of my favorites, and again, we don't have time to go through all of it, but one of my favorite parts of it is that you can read these quotes for yourself and figure out where I'm going. He puts into his first chapter of that book something called the Academic Credit Union, where he envisioned that all education would be taken care of by one university in Paris that would have 150,000 people in it. And they would all be taught, as he put it, by mechanical means. And what they were going to learn was going to be practicality and practical values. And my favorite part of it, he said, if you look at the board of directors of that, there was not a single academic among them. A point of some, how did he put it, comfort to those hoping to turn a profit. And I thought, ow, not wrong. I'm not on the board of Coca-Cola for a reason. But he envisioned that we were going to do this. And in my class, I point out, I'm like, yeah, this is one of the last bastions of bipartisanship in America. Everyone thinks that what I study is pointless. So there you go. Thank you, President Obama. Thank you, former Governor Scott. But yes, get out there and get something practical. But obviously, dystopias are not real, right? We don't live in a dystopia. I feel like it sometimes, but we don't, right? Dystopias are black and white. And so what Verne is giving you is a really, really negative image. It's not a great book, by the way. If you ever read the whole thing, it's not the most interesting thing in the world. But anyway, the other guy that we talk about with like the last 2 minutes before I guess, opened up the questions, and I lied to you and said we got time, I apologize, is H.G. Wells, right? H.G. Wells is a later contemporary of Verne. And H.G. Wells is probably most well known to us for writing
Time Machine.
Time Machine, great story.
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, yeah, it's probably his most famous one to us these days. The Time Machine was a classic film back in the 60s. It was a book, obviously, in the late 19th century. But Wells takes a much more openly sort of critical view of technology than Verne does, right? Aside from Paris in the 20th century, Verne's pretty positive about where technology could lead us. Wells, on the other hand, is like, I'm pretty sure technology is going to kill us, and we're the fault for it, you know. So like, if you read War of the Worlds, you know, there's this envisioning of basically these aliens coming to Earth, which you could argue are essentially us from the future, with these giant killing machines with like death rays and all this other stuff. But the Time Machine is especially sort of interesting, in which Wells posits that in the future, humanity is going to split into two almost totally different kind of species, right? One, which has become basically very docile and weak, and one that has become vicious and carnivorous. And what you eventually learn is that the vicious carnivorous ones living underground are feeding on the weak decadent ones up top. Wells is making a comment about socialism, by the way, in case you were not entirely sure about it. But for him, he's envisioning this future where essentially humanity has outrun its own technology, it's outrun its own ability. So the guy who's from his world, 1895, is walking around this world of 600,000 years in the future, and it's just ruins. And he's like, what the hell did we do? What happened? And then he meets these creatures, and that's most of the story. And then he goes all the way forward to like the end of time. Basically, like the sun is expanding to eat the earth. And then he goes back, and you're like, geez, thanks, Wells. He's a little bit of a nihilist, and the story is actually incredibly depressing because it does have that sort of like, who cares about any of this stuff? But for Wells, he's trying to make a kind of a social point that we need to value what everybody is doing, right? We can't divide into the haves and the have-nots too much. You know, if we do that, it is likely that it's just going to keep going, right? That's one of the biggest lessons of futurism when you study it, is it's almost always just a very straightforward extrapolation, right? That's why we end up with so many dystopias, because we can't really envision things changing organically. Skylar, yes.
Oh, we have a question on Zoom.
Okay, question on the Zoom. Well, I'll wrap up by saying it's a mixed bag, guys. In reality, one of the great failures of futurism is that almost always we do not understand nuance. As I tell my students, we can't know what we can't know. So when you look at the technology of the future, it is almost always going to be an extrapolation of the technology of what? Today, right? So if you watch any, and if we had more time, or if you took the class, we go into the 20th century and all of that, you were almost always going to see bigger, better versions of what we've already got. Back to the Future is a great example. When he gets to the world of 2015, God, he couldn't even imagine that in the 80s. He sees flying what? Flying cars. Yeah, huzzah. Why? Well, they had cars in 1985. Let's make them fly. That's the future. And so one of the biggest things that the folks never envisioned, this stupid thing right here. So until like the mid 2000s, virtually no piece of futurism ever envisioned that you were going to carry around the sum total of human knowledge in your pocket. And you would use it for whatever the hell reason you use it for, right? That's up to you. But anyway, if we had more time, we'd talk about propaganda and dehumanization, but we don't. So what is the question from the Zoom?
Brenda Deckers asked, isn't this what they are hoping to do? Learn to live on the moon so as to learn how to live on Mars.
For the haves.
Oh yeah, for the hats. That's a good point. Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, I mean, in theory, sure. I guess if we ever actually landed on the moon again, because I do think we actually landed on there the first time, and I can't believe I have to say that. But hey, we're in a wacky time in history. Yeah, the idea was that it was going to progress. So yeah, if you watch futurism or you read futurism from like the 60s and 70s, they very much assumed that by 2025, we're gonna have friggin' cities on Mars. I mean, we just got to the moon, right? It only took what, 60 years from powered flight to landing on the moon and getting back. Imagine where you're going to be in the next 60.
Don't even go there.
We don't even bother going. Who cares? Whatever. What the hell does the moon have that we need? And the answer is not much. But But yeah, that's a good point. But it also would be just for the haves. Yeah, that's also a good point. That bifurcation is a huge part of futurism. We're really, really worried about the extrapolation of our society of haves and have-nots, and that's how you end up with these guys here, right? Good. Any questions from the group? Austin.
I know that for a lot of these,
I know folks have to leave. I'm sorry. You guys can.
a lot of these dystopian pictures talk about a lot of that, qualities is a lot of individuality.
Yes.
I want to know if you've read and what you think of Ayn Rand's answer.
I've read Ayn Rand's Anthem. What I think about it is that it fits very clearly into this narrative, right? So authors like Ayn Rand saw in kind of socialism writ large a concern about the loss of individuality, which she equates to dehumanization, right? And you'll see that a lot. You see it in Orwell. You see it to an extent in Huxley. You do see it in Rand. You see it in a bunch of others, that what makes humans humans is their individuality. And so once you take that away, then yes, you might end up in this completely dehumanized kind of future where people are cattle, like the Eloi are, more or less. That's the short version of Ayn Rand. All right. Any other questions before we get out of here? I mean, I'm happy to stick around. I got nothing to do. I just hang out talking about futurists.
I guess, well, if you do need to head out, I wanted to say, take up a
Yes.
schedule
Take up a schedule.
for Food for Thought series. So we
There
actually
we go.
have our next speaker right here.
There she is.
Who's actually going to talk to us about AI in the classroom and things like that.
There we go.
So, yeah, so make sure to put these on your schedule, and there'll always be food and coffee and whatnot.
Hey.
Even if it's not part of the honors club,
That's
you'll
true.
still be.
That's true. They will. And yes, go to as many place events as you can. Come to as many honors colloquiums as you can, of course. I think our next one's not until the end of September. So we'll be working on some other stuff until then. If you do want to stick around and chat about this, I wasn't kidding. I'm happy to stick around and talk about futurism. I'm not teaching this class this fall, so this is my only chance to get to do this. So please come talk about it. That'd be fine. If not, then I will close the official part of this presentation, even though we didn't get to nuclear war or anything. I apologize. And I'll stick around and chat with folks who want to talk more about it. So thank you very much for coming, guys. I appreciate it. Oh, please, please. You don't need to applaud anemically. It's okay. Hey, thank you, good friends.
Mine isn't very defensible.
See you guys.
I mean, you could.